Good afternoon and welcome to today's activity. There is no commercial support. The speakers and planners have disclosed no relevant financial relationships with any commercial interests. If you have a question for the presenter, please enter it in the Q&A bubble and we will ask at the end of the presentation. If you are in person today, you will receive a SurveyMonkey link after today's activity. For those viewing online, the evaluation link will be listed in the links icon at the bottom of the screen. It is my pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker. Dr. Kenneth Carter is the Charles Howard Candler Professor of Psychology at Oxford College of Emory University and founding director of the Emory University Center for Public Scholarship and Engagement. He served as interim dean of Oxford College from 2022 through 2023 and holds degrees from Oxford College, Emory University, the University of Michigan, and Fairleigh Dickinson University. A board-certified clinical psychologist, Dr. Carter authored several textbooks, including Psychopathology, Understanding Psychological Disorders, and Living Psychology. He translates psychology research for the broader audiences, publishing in Psychology Today and Women's Health, and appearing on CNN, NPR, and NBC. His research focuses on the psychology of thrill-seeking, explored in his TEDx talk, and NBC Sports web series, Mind of a Motorhead. His latest book is Buzz, Inside the Minds of Thrill Seekers, Daredevils, and Adrenaline Junkies. Not being a thrill seeker, Dr. Carter enjoys reading and relaxing on the beach. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Carter to the stage.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, I consider myself more of a chill seeker than a thrill seeker. And so I'm really glad to be here today, glad for those of you who are in the room and those of you who are watching remotely. I do want to talk a little bit about sort of how I got interested in the psychology of thrill seeking and what I consider my fascination with thrill to be. You know, anyone that's met me for more than maybe 30 seconds, when they know that I study thrill seeking, one of the questions they often ask is, how did you get interested in thrill seeking? Because they can tell that I'm probably not a thrill seeker. Actually, when I first had this project in mind, I was actually working on a completely different book. I'm a very sort of organized person. My life is not very chaotic. And I was getting ready to write a book called The Chaos Junkie's Guide to Life. It was an idea about how to get people who are chaos junkies. Any of you know anyone that might be a chaos junkie at all? No pointing at other people. To be able to sort of rein in their chaos. And then when I started working on that book, I discovered a little bit about Marvin Zuckerman's work, which I'll talk about later on the psychology of high sensation seekers. And I thought, that's more interesting than this chaos junkie book. So I ended up abandoning that research and writing a book about thrill seekers instead. Now, those of you who know about psychology know that people are pretty good at being able to determine what emotions people might be feeling just based upon their facial expressions. So I'm going to show you a couple and we'll see if we can figure this out. So just based upon her facial expression, what emotion do you think this person is experiencing? Excitement. Yeah, she seems kind of happy. Okay, what about this person? Fear, terror. Now, the interesting thing to me is they're actually sitting right next to each other, okay? They're experiencing the very same thing, but they're having a very different reaction from it. And it's stuff like this that's got me really interested in psychology in general, but especially interested in this because I'm more likely to be the person that looks terrified than the person who is excited about it. I've also been sort of influenced by a number of people that I've been interviewing for this book. In fact, one of the very first people I interviewed was Mark. And Mark started off as a math professor. And when I talked to him about his excitement about thrill seeking, he said, oh, let me show you a video of a little walk I took recently. And this is a video of Mark giving a little walk that he did. Yeah, and so it's even hard for me to watch, much less imagine doing this at all. But you can see how calm he is. And it got me thinking, like, why is it that some people can do really terrifying, he's going to do the little jump here. Okay, scary things like this, but also seem incredibly calm during it. And that's what got me interested in sensation seeking. Now, interestingly, the research on sensation seeking didn't start with people like Mark or people that were riding roller coasters or wingsuit flying or things like that. It actually started in really dark rooms with people doing absolutely nothing. Marvin Zuckerman was studying sensory deprivation. The idea was that he thought that maybe being in sensory deprivation environments would lead people to be more able to be mind controlled. It doesn't. But he started off doing these things like the Gansfield technique. Darkened room, eyes covered, people, the idea was to be in a sensory deprived environment. What he discovered was that some people could stay in these situations for hours and hours and be perfectly fine, and others couldn't stand it for even a couple of minutes. The thing that they couldn't figure out is that no psychological test at the time could predict who was going to behave in which way. And so he ended up abandoning his work on sensory deprivation and decided to study sensation seeking as well. The other thing that was really interesting about the study was that he discovered that there were a lot of people at the time that were considered to be unconventional who were signing up to do these really, really dull sensory deprivation experiences. And they signed up for it because they heard that you might hallucinate if you did it. And so this began that shift of focus from the idea of sort of sensory deprivation into a field called sensation seeking. And here is Zuckerman's definition. Sensation seeking is a trait that's defined by the seeking of varied, novel, and complex sensations and experiences, and the willingness to take physical, social, legal, and financial risks for the sake of those experiences. It's really the experiences that they desire. The sensation-seeking survey is actually fairly easy. There's a brief version of it. You found a copy of it that you could take on your way in. But actually, we can go over it because it's actually really short. And or if you just have some paper near you, you can number your paper 1 through 8 and keep track of these 8 items. For each item, you're going to just indicate which of the choices, describes you best. Not at all like me, not like me, unsure or both, like me, or very much like me. Question number 1 is, I would like to explore strange places. Question 2, I get restless when I spend too much time at home. This was a tough one during the pandemic, but normally this is how it would be. Number 3, I like to do frightening things. Give yourself points for 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Number 4, I like wild parties. Number 5, I would like to take off on a trip with no pre-planned routes or timetables. Number 6, I prefer friends who are excitingly unpredictable. Number 7, I would like to try things like bungee jumping. And number 8, I would love to have new exciting experiences, even if they are illegal. So from these 8 questions, you can actually get a lot of information about yourself or for other people or your patients or clients on the sensation-seeking questionnaire. We're going to talk a little bit about the different components of sensation seeking in just a second, but you end up with several sets of scores. You get an overall score for your sensation seeking score, and then you can get different subcategories of scores based upon different sets of questions. Questions 1 and 2 end up being your experience seeking score. Questions 3 and 4 is your boredom susceptibility score. Question 5 and 6 is your disinhibition score. Question 7 and 8 is your thrill and adventure seeking score. I'll talk about what those mean in just a moment, but that gives you an idea. And there are some copies of this brief sensation seeking questionnaire if you'd like, or feel free to reach out to me and I can send you a PDF of this. Okay, let's think about like these different components of sensation seeking. The first that I want to talk about is is thrill and adventure seeking. When people think of thrill seekers, this is sort of what they're talking about. It's an adventure seeking trait that's sort of linked with physical activities that are exciting and risky. It could be roller coasters or wingsuit flying or driving really fast. Like always changing lanes when you're driving in Atlanta. And then the next component is your experience-seeking score. These are sensations of the mind and of the senses. These are sort of more emotional sensation-seeking. It could be linked to unusual people, travel, or unusual foods or culture, or unusual foods like this maggot cheese that is famous in Italy. The third component is called disinhibition. This has to do with your willingness to be spontaneous. People who score low on this always look before they leap. People that score high just leap. You see here being spontaneous at parties, or maybe doing any sort of unrestrained activities, like this photograph here from Seattle from several years ago at something called Pants Off Subway Day, which is a day that people decide that it would be fun to ride the subway without their pants. You would need a little bit of disinhibition to participate in something like that. The last component is called boredom susceptibility. It's how easy it is for you to get bored and how irritated you get when you get bored. People that score low almost never get bored. People that score high get bored really easily, and they can easily become irritated when they get bored. So from that, you can end up with different kinds of sensation-seeking personalities, because not all sensation seekers are alike. You can see different components of those 4 different parts. I'm going to take a look at a couple that I've interviewed. For these interviews, I used the longer sensation-seeking scale that varies a little bit. Oh, you know what I forgot to tell you? I forgot to tell you what my sensation-seeking score is on the scale from 0 to 30. I scored an 8 out of 30. So I'm pretty low in sensation-seeking. Very different than Rachel here, who scored a 29 for her out of 30 for her total sensation-seeking scale. She scored a 3 out of 10 for thrill and adventure seeking, an 8 out of 10 for experience seeking, a 9 out of 10 for disinhibition, so she's very disinhibited, and then an 8 out of 10 for boredom susceptibility. And this is what she said about herself. I avoid all things that I feel like are completely out of my control, but I love doing random and spontaneous things where I'm in charge. Hence, I hate flying commercially, and I have a fear of flying. So her sensation-seeking total score is a little bit higher than average, but her thrill and adventure-seeking score is fairly low. So I wouldn't think that she's going to do a lot of things like roller coasters or drive really fast on the highway, but she's really more likely to do spontaneous things that are going to bring that emotional sensation-seeking to her. Let's take a look at Alex. Alex has a total sensation-seeking of 35 out of 40, so relatively high. Thrill and adventure-seeking is a 10 out of 10. Her experience-seeking is a 9 out of 10. Disinhibition is 8 out of 10. Boredom susceptibility is 8 out of 10. So she's scoring relatively high on all 4 levels. This is the kind of person that makes me a little bit nervous, right? Because they may do those dangerous things spontaneously, or it could be emotional sensation seeking spontaneously and not necessarily always think through it. And this is how she describes herself. My family has described me as suffering from pathological wanderlust and always seeking adventure. When I was younger, they jokingly, sort of, tried to take away my National Geographic adventure and travel magazines because they gave me bad ideas. When I'm sick and in bed, I watch travel and adventure documentaries. I'm not very active on social media because I get bored just sitting at my computer. So it's not that surprising that her family might describe her as having pathological wanderlust. Her scores are pretty high, so she's going to take some risks. And her experience seeking is sort of reflected in the travel that she likes. And it's not that surprising that she may be bored because she is pretty disinhibited. Most people, of course, are going to score in the middle of sensation seeking. The people that I like to study are these high sensation seekers. And again, like I told you before, my sensation seeking score is an 8, which is probably lower than most. One of the things I definitely want to talk about is, how it really impacts a person in terms of their biological and social environments. And I want to tell you a little bit about a trip that I took to Twin Falls. Have any of you been to Twin Falls before? I had never been before. I was there right when DSM-5 first came out. I was doing a talk about the transition between DSM-4 to DSM-5 to a group of psychologists. And I had never been to Twin Falls before. I expected to see really sort of nice people and maybe potatoes. Those are the only things that I was thinking that I would see. And when I told them that this was before, right at the beginning when I was working on my book, and I told them that I'm studying thrill seekers, and they say, oh, if you're interested in thrill seekers, you're going to want to go to the bridge. I had no idea what the bridge was, and I said, well, how do I get there? It's like, oh, just get in a cab and tell the cab to take you to the bridge. Well, the bridge is the only bridge in North America where you can bungee jump from that bridge whenever you want to without a permit. Now, for me, as a thrill seeker, whenever you want to would be never. But I took a cab to the bridge, and when you're driving across it, it just looks like a regular bridge, but when you are off to the side, you see how tall that bridge is. And people come to the bridge in order to go base diving a lot. Base diving, for those of you who may not be familiar with that, is an acronym that stands for the kinds of things that people like to jump off of: bridge, antenna, spans, and earth or cliffs. And they come to the bridge in order to do that. So what I was doing at the time was I had sort of, I got out of the cab and I found these people who were folding these things that looked like really large kites on the ground. And I went up to them and said, hey, I'm working on a book about thrill seekers. And they said, oh, great, we're getting ready to jump off the bridge in a second if you want to come with us. And I said, great. So I took my camera. I was sort of off to the side. I think I was, let's see. Oh, here. I was off to the side, right around there, holding my camera up, and they said, no, come on the bridge with us as we jump off the bridge. So when I interviewed Nick, who actually is the person that was leading this group of people, he owns a parachute accessory company. He was taking a group of people off the bridge for the first time, and I asked him why he does this. And this is what he said. Jumping forces you to be in the now, like nothing else matters, and you're just focusing on what you're doing and you are enjoying it. I will say at the time when I was there, I had never felt so uncool in my entire life. I was nervous just because the traffic was coming by, and they all insisted on high-fiving me before climbing over the bridge and jumping off of the bridge. Now, I'm going to show you a little bit of a video here of Nick. He was the last person to jump after leading the things. And in his backpack there, that yellow backpack, is an old rescue parachute that is older than he is, that he was testing out for the very first time. And I want you to notice a couple of things about this video as I show it. Number one, I want you to notice the lack of any kind of anticipatory anxiety. Like, I have to gear myself up to do almost anything. You'll notice he doesn't really gear himself up for this experience. So let's just watch as Nick tests out his parachute for the first time. The other thing you probably noticed, and I've never watched someone jump with a parachute off a bridge before, but I kind of thought his chute opened up a little bit late. And so Nick texted me and said, hey, I think my chute opened up a little bit late. Can you send me the video of my jump? And I said, sure. And I did. And when we talked a little bit later, I said, Nick, how did you feel as you were falling and you noticed that your chute hadn't opened yet? And here's what he said. So I'm watching the ground rush up, and it's almost like an eerie, surreal feeling. In a way, you're scared, but another way, you're really calm and taking it all in. You're like, this is what's happening. I'm along for the ride, I said, no, Nick, I have no idea what you're talking about. Because as a low sensation seeker, I would have been overwhelmed with that experience. As a high sensation seeker, he's sort of noticing the things. And this is very typical. So these different kinds of experiences of the world can really be explained by some neurobiological and environmental factors that influence sensation seeking. And I want to talk about just a couple of them. I get into a little bit more detail in the book, but I just want to point out a couple of ones for today. The first is that high sensation seekers tend to have a different kind of sensitivity to certain kinds of chemicals that are involved in arousal, approach, and inhibition. And really what I want to talk a little bit about is the interplay between stress hormones like cortisol and higher levels of neurotransmitters like dopamine. So when individuals that are high sensation seekers are exposed to really chaotic kinds of environments, they tend to have lower levels of cortisol, that sort of stress hormone, and higher levels of pleasure neurotransmitters like dopamine than their low sensation seeking friends. This explains why people with high sensation seeking personalities may experience less stress, but more pleasure in those high sensation seeking activities. People like me that are low sensation seekers, I'm going to be more likely to have higher levels of cortisol and not that much dopamine. So I'm going to feel stressed in that experience as opposed to having that really nice balance of cortisol and dopamine. But there are also some environmental aspects to this as well. We know that early stimulating environments tend to be correlated with high sensation seeking. Different family environments are correlated with high sensation seeking as well. And people that report being very spiritual, it tends to impact their boredom susceptibility. So we know that there's some environmental things that can have an impact as well. Sensation seeking isn't just what a person does, it's sort of part of their personality, so it can impact multiple things in their life. It can impact their careers, their hobbies, it can create different habits, and it can create havoc in their lives as well. For example, high sensation seeking individuals tend to drive faster. They change lanes more often than their average and low sensation seeking partners. And they actually did this really interesting study with for driving, where they had a pace car and someone behind the car, and they said to the people, just follow this car that's right in front of you. They also took heart rate and other biological measures, and what they discovered that the low sensation seeking individuals followed the pace car fairly far behind and were pretty stressed when it happened. The high sensation seekers, on the other hand, followed the pace car really close and were really calm when they were doing it. And so if you have friends that love to change lanes and follow cars in front of them a lot, and you're really stressed out, then you may be a low sensation seeker. And I have to remind myself that my high sensation seeking friends aren't aware of the stress that I might be experiencing at that time. It also affects recreational activities that the person might choose. It costs a lot of money to do bungee jumping and dive off of cliffs. So a lot of high sensation seekers that don't have access to those resources end up driving or not backing down from fights when they could, because they can get that sort of high sensation seeking buzz from those other activities. It even affects the foods that they will try. Low sensation seeking individuals tend to pick foods that they know that they will like, and they tend to get more disgust reactions from foods that are unusual to them. High sensation seeking individuals, especially those that are high in experience seeking, love to choose unusual foods, especially when it brings them closer to different kinds of cultures. They're not as worried about not liking something. It can also impact their work as well. You find a lot of high sensation seeking individuals in emergency medicine who can actually handle the chaos of that. Probably not as many in other places. I interviewed a woman who was started out in emergency medicine and then switched to primary care, but she found it to be really, really tough for her because she really missed the chaos of emergency medicine. In terms of relationships, it can really impact the way that people relate to others in general. It can impact friendships and romantic relationships too, especially if an individual is with someone who is not the same sensation seeking as they are. So if you are a low sensation seeker and you have a high sensation seeking partner, there may be some sort of chaos around the kinds of things that an individual might find fun to do. I recommend that having both people take the sensation-seeking survey, and what you might find is that there may be some commonalities around experience-seeking. So trying unusual foods or different restaurants or different cultural events or different travel can sort of scratch that sensation-seeking bug for both people. But it's important not to pathologize it if it's not really a problem for those. Now, in terms of personality, behavior, and attitudes, we know that high sensation seekers have a high degree of autonomy. They like sort of being in control of their lives. They're very emotionally expressive and can be fairly assertive. And it's really, and they can see themselves as very independent in the way that they think, and they often see themselves as fearless. And they may be more likely to jump into situations, especially if they have high levels of disinhibition, to be able to sort of figure things out. One of the things that's important, I think I might talk about this a little bit later, it's easy to think of high sensation seekers as extroverts, but there doesn't tend to be any correlation between introversion and extroversion and sensation seeking. What they do is they choose different kinds of activities if you're a high sensation seeking introvert. They tend to do independent activities like bouldering or skydiving, where you can do that sort of in smaller groups as opposed to larger group kind of situations. There are lots of healthy aspects to sensation seeking. We know that high sensation seeking individuals are independent, they're active and curious. They actually have less stress and anxiety and better coping skills. But there can be some problematic aspects of sensation seeking as well. They are more likely to have problems in terms of certain aspects of relationships if their sensation seeking is really high. You see them more likely to try substances for the first time, and they're more likely to have more aggressive behaviors and not backing down from fights. Oh yeah, I mentioned this before. Yes, they have a higher risk for addictive disorders, including substance use conditions and behavioral addictions like gambling, for example. They're more likely to be involved in disruptive behavior as kids, and they're more likely to be involved in aggressive behavior than average or low sensation seekers. It can also make the existing psychological problems more problematic for them. For very high sensation seekers, these are people that might score tens all across. You might see some lower levels of empathy because, like most people believe that other people see the world in the same way that they do. And if you're in a situation where you're not frightened by chaos or driving fast or doing unusual kinds of things, you might assume that other people had that same experience as well. And so it might be helpful to remind clients to do some check-ins with friends and family and partners to make sure that other people are experiencing the same things that they are. They can sometimes have trouble with emotional regulation. In fact, some high sensation seeking people that I've interviewed say they use high sensation seeking activities to practice emotional regulation. One person I interviewed if you Google slackline girl, you'll learn more about her. A slackline is a woven band about the width of a credit card, and you can stretch it across long distances and walk on it. She actually is famous for walking on this slack line in high heels, and she's actually done it a couple of times untethered as well. When I talked to her about it, she said, I could walk on the floor from here to there, and I'm seen to be fine. I have no fear. I can do it without any trouble. I should be able to do the same thing if it's, 300 feet above the ground. And so she uses the practice of slacklining to be able to control her emotions. And she said that actually impacts the ability to control emotions in other situations as well. And so that emotional regulation is something that you have to practice in certain high sensation seeking activities, and it really helps her in other ways as well. For those with higher amounts of disinhibition and higher amounts of boredom, they can also be problematic as well. In terms of demographic information for high sensation seeking, in terms of age, it tends to peak in early adolescence when some of the chemicals that are also involved in it, like testosterone in both men and women, tend to be a little bit higher, and it decreases as people get older. It remains relatively stable, except for one of the areas that does tend to. It tends to decrease as people get older, except for one area, and that one area is boredom susceptibility. And so if you see a teenager that's very high sensation seeking, they may end up in their 60s and 70s with lower levels of sensation seeking. Some of it's driven by biological factors in terms of the chemicals. Others are sort of impacted by other people being anchors and pulling them back from some of those high sensation seeking activities because you have more to lose in some ways as you get older. Gender is an interesting one. I think gender differences in sensation seeking have been really impacted by culture. Some of the original studies of sensation seeking saw that the average for men and women tended to be a little bit different, with men having higher scores for thrill and adventure seeking and women having higher scores for experience seeking. Lately, that's changed, where you see similar scores for both men and women, and I think this shows the influence of culture on sensation-seeking pursuits. In terms of sensation-seeking versus other psychological concepts, it tends to be very distinct from ADHD. There doesn't seem to be any correlation between ADHD and sensation-seeking. And like I mentioned before, also distinct from introversion and extroversion, and also from bipolar disorder as well. The one thing I do want to point out is that you might see some sensation-seeking behavior in individuals with PTSD, and that's very different than high sensation-seeking as a personality trait. Some of that sort of risk tolerance that you see decreasing in individuals with PTSD is different than the personality factor of sensation seeking that's relatively stable. In terms of introducing sensation seeking with clients, I would start off by introducing the topic to them so that they are familiar with what sensation seeking is. You can even have them watch, I did a TEDx video a couple of years ago. So if you Google "just for the thrill of it, Ken Carter," you can see a very short version of sort of explaining the different components of sensation seeking to it. Have them take that brief sensation seeking survey, really easy, just 8 questions to take, and discuss with them the results of it and the risks and benefits of being a high sensation seeker, how it might impact their life in certain kinds of ways, and then talk a little bit about sort of potential changes. I don't see high sensation seeking as a problem in general, but if it creates problems in an individual, there are some things that you can do to sort of help move the needle a little bit. A lot of it has to do with sort of having them temper the parts of that sensation-seeking personality that might get them into trouble. For me, I think about disinhibition and borderline susceptibility as the things that are more likely to lead to problematic behavior. So you're going to think about some ways to sort of help them to pull back on that. Having them do some stop and think activities, having them practice their empathy can be really helpful as well, looking at how other people might respond to the things that they might be doing, finding some insight into their impulsivity, slowing them down, finding those social anchors in their life to remind them to pull back on certain kinds of activities. And try to separate sensation seeking from novelty seeking. I think a lot of people think that high sensation seekers are always going to think of new things and take the next step and get more complicated and more dangerous over time. That's not necessarily the case. Those with high levels of borderline susceptibility may do the same things over and over again. So finding out like what kinds of things that they might need for novelty and focusing that novelty on experience seeking is going to help them a little bit rather than focusing it on that thrill and adventure seeking. I would say reality checks in terms of the impact that their sensation seeking might have on them and other people in their lives, and in making sure to examine the potential consequences of the things that they want to do. Really sort of tempering that disinhibition as well as that boredom susceptibility. Building empathy can be really helpful. Cultivating curiosity about strangers, wondering what other people might be experiencing is really helpful and important. Having them challenge their prejudices and discover commonalities with other people. The activity of trying on another person's life, and then trying to get them to listen and open up to other people can really be helpful. Meditation can be helpful for people with high sensation seeking personalities as well. It's tough for some high sensation seekers that get bored relatively easily. So I would have them start off very small, short. Couple of minutes of meditation can be really helpful, even walking meditations if they get bored relatively easily. Have them understand the benefits of meditation, understand the principles and how it can be helpful for them, and have them do it in a way that's going to be right for them. Meditation is not a one-size-fits-all, and try to reduce the all or nothing thinking around meditation. So if you can't do it, the way that it's described, that it's not going to work, but finding their way to do it. I try to find ways to help them to gamify that meditation. Apps like calm.com, Headspace, and one of my favorites, which is Do Nothing for 2 minutes. It's a website, which is donothingfor2minutes.com, and you try to do nothing for 2 minutes. But even if they have there are lots of apps and different kinds of meditations that can be helpful for different things. There's some compassion meditations, some empathy meditations that can be really helpful for high sensation seeking. Do your best to try to help them to promote healthy activities. Adventure sports is a great way to go. What's the name of the, CrossFit. So CrossFit, if you're looking for high sensation seeking people, CrossFit's a great place to find them. But those adventure sports activities can be really helpful. Actually, I did a Coursera course in the psychology of thrill seeking years ago, and we did one of the episodes at the Georgia Mud Run, where people will, run through tasers and mud and all sorts of things as part of the run, but getting them involved in those adventure sports can be helpful as well. And then trying out some experience-seeking activities. I know during the pandemic, when a lot of high sensation seekers couldn't get out, I got lots of emails from them about what can I do to sort of scratch the sensation-seeking itch I have. And part of it is, focusing on adventure-seeking rather than thrill and focus on experience-seeking more so on thrill and adventure-seeking. And again, trying to find ways to sort of reduce that disinhibition. Now, for those of us that are not thrill seekers and more average or chill seekers like me, what can we learn from them? I think there's a lot of stuff that we can all take away from thrill seekers. One of the things that everyone always asks me is like, after working on your book about thrill seeking, what exciting thrill seeking thing did you do? And I said, interview the thrill seekers. That was the exciting thing that I did. But I did learn a lot about myself and other people from working on this project. And I want to focus on a couple of them, and I'm going to open it up for questions. Number one, go with the flow. Now, one of the things that's really helpful is a psychological concept I'm sure you're familiar with, which is flow. Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi came up with this concept. If you've ever been doing something and sort of forgot that you're doing it, maybe it's puzzles or reading or gardening, that's the concept of flow. It's being fully immersed in something, holding an energized focus, full involvement and enjoyment in the moment. And the more that you are in flow, the more likely you are to be creative, satisfied, you have higher self-esteem, and high sensation-seeking individuals find flow in climbing, adventure sports, adventure travel. But low sensation seekers can find flow as well. We find it in listening to music, reading, and gardening. And so find your flow the way that you find your flow. The other thing is feel the awe. When I was working on this book, it's really awe is something that we're all after. That's that experience of sort of this mind-expanding experience that we've all have. So a feeling of astonishment and wonder. And it turns out that awe is pretty good for you. They did a study a while ago at UC Berkeley. It involved about 100 students, asking them how frequently they experience different emotions. And they actually linked that with interleukin-6. And they found that those people that experience awe had sort of lower levels of this inflammation, which means that awe can be really good for you. Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi says the best moments in our lives are not the passive, receptive, relaxing times. The best moments are usually occur in a person's body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. Again, high sensation seekers, this is a picture from Slackline Girl balancing. I couldn't walk in high heels from here to over there, but she can balance on this very thin woven cord. I'm not going to find awe or flow in that. I'm more likely to find it in a place like this. It's a picture I took when I was in Alaska a couple of years ago. Probably the biggest thing that I feel like I learned from high sensation seekers is to trust themselves, to trust yourself. One of my study that I've read about years ago, I try to mention it anytime I can. They found a group of people and asked them to keep a worry list, all the different kinds of things they were worried about that week. I need to get bananas, but what if they're out of them at the store? I'm going to forget to call my mom on her birthday. Make out all that worry list every day for a week or so. And then a couple of months later, they followed up and they asked them, hey, remember this worry list, the things that you were worried about? Which of these things actually happened? And how did you deal with those that did happen? And what they discovered was that 80% of the things that they were worried about never happened at all. And of the 20% that did occur, they handled it better than they thought they were going to. As a low sensation seeker, that with a lot of cortisol in my body, I tend to do a lot of that, what I call recreational anxiety, where I worry about stuff that probably isn't going to happen. I have a plan A, I have a plan B, I have a C, D, E, and F. And I probably only needed plan A and probably B and C, but I didn't need it all the way to F, right? And what high sensation seekers, on the other hand, they just throw themselves into different situations and they figure, I'll figure it out as I go along. And most of the time, they do. And what I learned from them is being able to trust myself and have those experiences and collect those experiences is a really worthwhile way to live my life. I'm really inspired by one of the people that I interviewed that I call Victor in the book. He says, he always tries unusual foods and different experiences. And when I asked him why, this was his explanation. He said, every time something new comes up, I think, oh, wouldn't that be a fantastic thing to add to that collection? Wouldn't that be a great other thing to go in that little museum I've got in my mind? Every time I learn about something new, I want to go out and try it. And so one of the things I ask myself, and I challenge you, is that what do you want to add to the museum in your mind? And I think that's the biggest takeaway as a low sensation seeker that I got from those high sensation seekers, is to create that collection of that museum in my mind. I've got time. Actually, I've got some time for some questions. I have one little video that I might show you a little bit later, but if not, I think we've got about 5 or 10 minutes for questions.
Sure. We can take some questions. Just
Yeah.
raise your hand if you have a question.
Yes.
Thank you. I can't thank you enough. This is a great topic. And I'm a former bungee jumper.
Oh,
and
great.
And now my sensation seeking is going to Costco on a Saturday. So
You'll never know what you're going to
time.
find
Yeah,
at Costco.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I interpreted it right. I was curious though about the correlation between ADHD and sensation. You did not find a correlation?
Yeah, I was looking at a couple of studies and I didn't see any sort of consistent correlation between ADHD and high sensation seeking in the way that Zuckerman described it, looking at those 4 different components. Although some of the kinds of things that can help ADHD in terms of meditation and sort of helping with that disinhibition can help as well, but I didn't see any correlations in the research between those 2 categories.
Have you found that this trait is generally stable over time?
It tends to be relatively stable over time, and I sort of stumbled through that part when in the talk. Yeah, it tends to peak in early adolescence. All the 4 components, and 3 of the 4 remain relatively stable and then decrease as people get much older. The one that remains sort of consistently stable over time is boredom susceptibility, but thrill and adventure seeking, disinhibition, and boredom susceptibility tend to sort of change. Yeah.
We do have a question from one of our online audience members. It says, hi, have you seen any correlation for individuals with psychopathy?
I think that, one of the things that I get asked a lot about is that those individuals that may have like antisocial personality disorder and whether or not that may be correlated with high sensation seeking. And so what I would say is that if you had a party and everyone at the party had antisocial personality disorder, I do not recommend having that kind of party. But if you had a group of people with antisocial personality disorder, you're going to see higher correlations of high sensation seeking in those individuals. But I would say that it's but I don't want people to think that people with high sensation seeking personalities are more likely to, that just because someone has a high sensation seeking personality, they're going to be more likely to have antisocial personality disorder. But there is a correlation between those for sure. I may have time to show you one more little video. What I want to do is, a couple of years ago when I was doing the Coursera course in psychology of thrill seeking, I did this thing that I called the jelly bean challenge, where I was trying to look to see how high sensation seeking may impact the desire to eat unusual foods. And if you're familiar with Harry Potter, you know there was this Harry Potter's Bernie Bott's every flavor beans. And when I say every flavor, any flavor you can think of these jelly beans. So I had a group of students that were taking my class, and I said, we're going to do a fun thing. I didn't tell them what they were going to do, but what they did was they took the copy of the Brief Sensation Seeking Survey, and you'll see their scores there in the bottom in a moment, and I offered them a jelly bean, and I told them that it could be one of two flavors. One flavor could be delicious, one might be disgusting, and they could decide whether or not they wanted to take it. And you saw some interesting correlations between sensation seeking and them wanting to do this. And so this is what I call the jelly bean challenge, and we'll close out the day with this.
Okay, I bet you're curious about what we're up to today. I've got some jelly beans here of different flavors. Some are delicious and some can be kind of disgusting. I've chosen a jelly bean for you. I will tell you what the possible flavors are, and then you can decide if you want to eat it or not. So take a look at your jelly bean. You don't have to eat it. Yours is either strawberry banana or barf. Do you want to try your jelly bean? You don't have to if you don't want to. Do you want to try it?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, you're okay, that's fine. Back in the cup. Okay. Your jelly bean, it's either juicy pear or booger.
You know what?
Okay.
Oh my god. What am I tasting right now?
Is it juicy pear?
It's not juicy pear. It's an interesting flavor, though.
It's an interesting flavor. Okay. Okay, great. Take a look at yours. That one is either chocolate pudding or canned dog food. Oh, chocolate, great. Yours is either buttered popcorn or rotten egg.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Okay. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Yours is either strawberry banana or barf. You want to try it? Yeah. Okay.
Not strawberry banana.
Okay. Not sure you think it's barf?
That's like cat food.
Oh, kind of tastes like cat food.
But yeah, fine.
Yours is either juicy pear or booger. Do you want to try it? Pear. Okay, good, good. So yours is either chocolate pudding or canned dog food. Do you want to try it? Okay. You can spit it out if you want. Do you want to try the last one? It's either buttered popcorn or rotten egg.
Think of those for two.
Is that rotten egg? Okay. Do we have any more water for him? Your third jelly bean you're trying. This jelly bean is either strawberry banana smoothie or dead fish.
I really hope it's dead fish.
Do you want to try it? Oh, strawberry banana smoothie. Okay, great. Thank you guys so much for doing this.
We could
Research by Xavier Sarah.
Sorry. We could not get Sean to stop eating them, actually. And at the very end, he actually took a whole handful of all different ones and just threw them at his mouth at once. And you saw his sensation-seeking scores were like all like 9s or 10s for each of them. Anyway, I'm happy to answer any individual questions you might have after this. Feel free to reach out to me too at my email address, which is kenneth.carter@emory.edu. I've got some other interviews I've done on my website. So if you go to drkencarter.com, look under media, you'll see some links to some other interviews I've done on sensation seeking and other topics. I think also on that website, you can find the sensation seeking survey. But again, feel free to reach out to me anytime for questions or things like that. So thank you so much for coming, and have a great rest of your day.